I'm Yasmin Simon. I'm an attorney here in Dallas. Progress Texas gives you the news in Texas in a quick 7 to 8 minute blurb every single day. We need to dig in on better communications here in Texas. So listen to Progress Texas, subscribe to Progress Texas, support Progress Texas, because this is the only entity that is getting the message out in a consistent manner across the state.
It's Tuesday, January 6, 2026, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Leading with news on vaccines this morning is Bonnie Petrie at Texas Public Radio says the Donald Trump CDC has significantly reduced its recommended childhood vaccine schedule, removing immunizations for rotavirus, influenza, meningococcal disease or meningitis, RSV, and hepatitis A and B. Yes, all springing from the expertise of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, as you may know, does not have any formal medical training. He is not a doctor. He never attended medical school. He does not hold a medical license, nor does he hold any clinical certifications. Unlike one of our favorite Texas heroes, Dr. Peter Hotez down in Houston, he warns that bypassing the traditional advisory committee on immunization practices to mimic Denmark, a smaller and structurally very different country than the U.S., of course, is a grave mistake, expressing particular alarm over the removal of meningococcal and rotavirus vaccines, citing his own clinical experience with the severity of those diseases in children. A meningitis infection can kill an insufficiently vaccinated child in less than 24 hours. So, let's look at this clearly. This is a change to federal recommendations, in this case made without standard scientific review protocols. Meanwhile, individual states retain the authority to maintain their existing vaccine requirements regardless of this new federal guidance. And regarding what really matters here, Dr. Hotez recommends that Texas parents, regardless of their personal politics or personal position on vaccinations, lean on the expertise of their kids' doctors rather than paying attention to the pseudoscience that's permeated the Trump HHS. Hotez says, quote, I think it's really important that you trust your pediatrician and have discussions with your pediatrician if you're uncertain. They're well trained in vaccinations, unquote. And what a great idea. Speaking of bright ideas, you might have heard that Republican officials in both Dallas and Hays counties had been planning to hand count primary ballots this March, apparently taking inspiration from the 2024 Gillespie County hand counting disaster that resulted in miscounts and discrepancies in 12 of their 13 precincts. Jane Tim at NBC News says GOP officials in both Dallas and Hays County have abandoned those plans, citing overwhelming logistical and financial barriers. In Dallas County, the second most populous in the state, GOP Chairman Allen West announced the reversal after the party failed to recruit the 3,000 volunteers necessary to count tens of thousands of ballots within the state-mandated 24-hour window. And in Hays County, Republicans opted back into machine tabulation due to difficulty securing federally required voting machines for disabled voters and accessing the precinct data needed to facilitate a manual count. So, both of those counties will continue using the machines in March. Meanwhile, they're still at it in Gillespie County. They'll try hand counting again in March, and Eastland County, east of Abilene, will too, even as both experts and recent experience warn that hand counting is a lot slower, a lot more expensive, and a lot more prone to human error. One name you won't see on the Democratic ballot in the governor's race, after all, is Andrew White, whom we featured on our podcast multiple times here at Progress Texas, and whom I think I've run into at probably 75% of the live political events I've attended over the last 6 months or so across the state. White cites fundraising challenges for calling it a day, and he's thrown his support behind Democratic frontrunner Gina Hinojosa, who very graciously accepted on Twitter, saying, quote, I'm incredibly grateful to Andrew White for his leadership and for the show of support. It takes incredible courage to run for statewide office in Texas, and it takes even more to step down when you know what's at stake. I'm humbled and honored to have his endorsement, unquote. I've come to really like Andrew White personally, and at Progress Texas, we thank him for his hard work in elevating the conversation about the real opportunity we have to flip the governorship of Texas this year. What's happened in Venezuela and what happens next in Venezuela remains the central topic in global news. And as we've discussed, given our proximity right across the Gulf of Mexico and our refining infrastructure on the Gulf Coast, custom built for the heavy crude that the Venezuelan oil fields contain, Texas is certainly part of the plan to turn that sovereign country into a vassal petro state. Michelle Davis at Lone Star Left does a great job of reviewing the realities of the Texas oil industry at this crucial moment. Michelle reminds us that the dominance of big oil in the Lone Star State is maintained through political corruption rather than economic necessity, and that the move on Venezuela fits the historical playbook of destabilizing foreign nations, say Iran, Iraq, Libya, and on, to benefit Texas-headquartered corporations like ExxonMobil and Chevron. And while we've all been force-fed the narrative that fossil fuels form the backbone of Texas, when you crunch recent numbers, you find that clean energy now employs significantly more Texans than the oil and gas sectors combined. Big oil functions as a political class that holds great sway over the state legislature through billionaire donors to protect profits. Public health be damned. We're the largest carbon dioxide emitter in the U.S. Marginalized Houston neighborhoods harbor well-documented cancer clusters. Fossil fuel-related pollution contributes to 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. And big oil dwarfs big tobacco when it comes to making us sick. The idea that Texas needs oil to survive is a complete lie. It's quite the opposite, really, as big oil depends on Republican dominance to maintain the status quo that sacrifices the well-being of millions of Texans for corporate gain, a status quo that will remain in place in Texas as long as Republican dominance remains in place in Texas. As we wind down this morning on this 5th anniversary of the January 6th insurrection, we should all take a moment to review the events of that day and refresh them in our minds, of course, now realizing that the guy who that mob was supporting is now back in charge of our country. January 6th represents not a memory of a past threat, but a warning of an ongoing and building threat. January 6th removes any surprise that might be warranted for the escalating overreach that crowds our news feeds on a daily basis and underscores the worry of the rest of the peace-loving world that such a man could have found his way back into the White House. We add also to our review of that day the fact that all of these people have been pardoned, and wonder, perhaps one day we'll know, how many of them now hold official positions within the Trump machine, primarily as masked ICE agents. January 6 stands as proof that the guardrails of democracy in America have been dismantled by Donald Trump, and in Texas, that effort has no truer champion than Governor Greg Abbott, who, while he spent his entire career crowing about states' rights, under Trump has surrendered Texas's sovereignty to serve Trump as a loyal, reliable, and subservient puppet, via the racist rearranging of our congressional map to steal representation from underserved communities for Trump, the mobilizing of Texas National Guard soldiers and into unwilling fellow U.S. states under Trump, and more recently requiring Texas law enforcement agencies not to protect their local Texans, but to serve as immigration enforcement under Trump. This midterm year, January 6 must shift from a warning we vow never to forget to a call to organize in order to survive. It's clear to anyone paying attention that the upcoming midterm elections are the last stand for democratic accountability in the United States. Watch that footage, recall all that's happened since, and redouble your efforts to take our state and our country back. Early voting in the March primary starts on February 17th. That's real soon, y'all. And added to the ongoing important stuff at the bottom of the show notes this morning is a Texas 2026 March primary ballot form from the Texas Tribune that you can use right now with your home address to see who's running in the primary in which you choose to vote. A great tool to use to look into candidates and actually know who they are and what they're about before you head to the polls. Super handy and something you should start looking at right now if you haven't yet. Our mission at Progress Texas is to counter the billionaire and corporate-funded conservative disinformation machine, and we rely largely on listener support to keep doing what we do. While we enjoy the support of hundreds of partners, chances are that you, dear listener, haven't joined the team yet. If you're a regular, let's get you on board right now. A huge thanks to Marlon May, Christina Ayala, and Linda Miller. We appreciate all of you very, very much. Join them and the rest of the team at progresstexas.org. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Tuesday, January 6, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a terrific day. We'll catch you again here tomorrow morning.